We're now back in session, and the next item remaining from this afternoon, and then under unfinished business is the homeless status report, next steps, and before I go to you, Mr. Barwin, the city attorney has something to say.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I had just spoken to the mayor briefly in the break, and I just said, just as a word of caution, we don't want to borrow trouble here. This was an agenda item, and there's no problem discussing it, but I know there was a fairly substantive report that was passed out, or at least I got mine when I arrived today, that had 8 fairly substantive recommendations for you. So I'm just going to recommend that you not vote on this today, because you don't want to invite the possibility of questioning over sunshine law and adequacy of notice. And if you defer voting, that will enable the general public to know what the recommendations are and what you're being asked to do. So again, no problem in discussion, but I did want to say at the outset, I'm going to ask that you not vote, that you continue with the vote. Thank you.
We can yet receive it as a...
And you can discuss it, and you can take public testimony. I'm just asking that you have another meeting to discuss, to let other people address it who might not have been aware of what was being proposed.
Before we take any action.
Before you take action.
All right, Mr. Barwin.
Thank you, Mr. Fournier, Mr. Mayor. And obviously it's getting late, so I will try to move through this material rather efficiently. But the City Commission has requested that staff update the Commission on our homelessness challenge, or especially the chronically homeless, and make recommendations for next steps. And we're prepared to do that here this evening.
Okay. Just before we go further, Commissioners, I will need a motion to extend the meeting.
So moved. Second.
Very well.
I couldn't read your lips.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I'm not sure we were done with the last item.
Point of order, we have a motion on the floor.
The motion
Oh,
is...
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh.
So, Commissioners, if you'd vote on
it to extend
the extending of the meeting.
Oh. Okay.
Your vote?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. And now to...
I'm sorry, Mr. Barwin.
Go ahead.
There was discussion about giving some direction to Mr. Fournier about the sign research that I don't think we ever got to because we had some malfunction, about whether or not he should research further the possibility of an exemption from some of the requirements for A-frame signs for
those
establishments.
Would be signs for business establishments with frontage on the right-of-way, as Mr. Soto's.
Do we need a motion, or can you have it just done by consensus?
As long as I know there's a consensus for me to come back and do it, I'll do it. And so,
And just a clarification, this is commercial speech.
Right.
yes, these are signs for the benefit of those businesses that have frontage on the right-of-way.
And we're going to consider allowing that on public right-of-way.
I'm going to look into that and see how it's done in other jurisdictions and if it can be done, and not come back with an ordinance, but come back with the report.
Okay, just want to be clear in my mind.
Now, back to you, Mr. Barwin.
Thank you, Mayor. The goal here is to present hopefully a coherent summary of the history regarding homelessness in our community, how we got to where we are, a close-up of where we are now, and some ideas for future action steps and how to proceed from here, where we go from here. Our conclusions and recommendations represent staff's consensus based on our interactions with people living on the streets, supplemented by research. And in preparing this report, we have reached out to seek the input from those organizations who have been attempting to manage the challenges here since 1990, including judges, caseworkers, police officers, mental health professionals, homeless experts, residents, merchants, and as mentioned, the chronically homeless themselves. But to fashion a solution to any challenge, no matter what it is, it's most helpful to understand what has possibly contributed to causing the situation. Although the National Alliance to End Homelessness contends that homelessness has declined by 17% from 2005 to 2012, there are still over 600,000 homeless individuals remaining living on the streets in America. America has quite a bit higher homeless rate than other developed countries like England, Japan, Germany, Norway, and Canada, and we have tried to research how they approach this challenge in those countries. In the United States, the states of Florida, California, and New York have experienced the highest percentage of homelessness, and obviously the situation has been at a higher crisis level in many urbanized and desirable areas of the country for many years now. In our research, there appears to be a correlation between chronic homelessness and the dramatic reduction of mental health beds across the country in recent decades. We've discussed it here before, but I just wanted to lay that out as one of the situations that has helped contribute to the challenge. Over the last 3.5 decades, over 400,000 mental health beds have been closed and shut down, even as their population has grown. But the national decline in homelessness rates is generally being attributed to better housing programs. But funding mental health to replace the closed institutions, community mental health, has not followed or has not been met. And this is evidenced in our surveys that we're going to present here tonight and from the recent point-in-time surveys where the chronically homeless living in our area self-report, 50% self-report serious psychological issues, mental health challenges, and or addiction problems. Closer to home, as some of you will recall, the hospital, G. Pierce Woods Memorial Hospital, closed in 2002. G. Pierce Woods, located in nearby Arcadia, had 1,034 beds. Once those closed, people who were living here at the time have related to us that it was shortly thereafter that they saw a significant uptick in homeless activity on the streets of Sarasota. Now, clearly, not all chronically homeless individuals are suffering from serious mental health or substance abuse challenges, but we believe at least 50% are, and probably a somewhat higher percentage. In terms of what we do have for mental health facilities, we have the Baker Act to address mental health issues and the Marchman Act to address substance abuse issues, but those are limited to 72-hour interventions that are only applied to individuals who exhibit an immediate danger to themselves or others. The organization's staffing and capacity to manage the mental health cases of the chronically homeless beyond 72 hours is grossly inadequate. To the best of our knowledge, we're continuing to research this, but there is a severe shortage in mental health beds and any ability to treat folks beyond 72 hours. And even in those 72 hours, it's just a diagnosis. Short of treatment facilities, what is occurring so often is behaviors deteriorate. We are seeing some dysfunctional behaviors that deteriorate sometimes to antisocial and criminal behaviors, which are leading to a revolving door of EMS responses, short jail stays, and emergency room visits for too many of our homeless. Locally, it is not unusual for 20% of our jail beds to be occupied by transients or homeless individuals, including many repeat offenders. The Sarasota County Fire Department EMS transports on average 100 chronically homeless individuals to Sarasota Memorial Hospital each month, including many what are called frequent flyers. Beyond the mental health challenges and lack of facilities, some secondary causes are ones you're familiar with, the decline of low-skill, middle-class wage jobs due to the globalization of the economy, the geographic splintering of the American family, and in our area and other areas, the critical shortage of low-cost housing options and permanent supportive housing to accommodate extremely low-income individuals. The Commission has asked us to attempt to estimate the cost of chronic homelessness in Sarasota County. We've attempted to do that. As I noted, 20% of our jail beds are usually occupied or often occupied by homeless transient individuals at $75 per day. If one were to do the math and just with a slight rounding up, the cost of jailing transients in this county comes to about $5.5 million per year. And there's miscellaneous costs associated with arrests and courts and record keeping for another $500,000. So just between the arrests and jailing and all the record keeping, we're looking at $6 million. When you look at ambulance and emergency room visits, the traffic and transports that I described by the fire department amounts to about $1.5 million a year. Sarasota Memorial Hospital tells me that they're spending $1 million a year on unreimbursable costs for treating the chronically homeless. And then when you add other miscellaneous costs, like homeless outreach, accident investigations, property damages, police counseling without arrests, camp, street, and neighborhood cleanups, and potential impacts on other parts of our economy, it's very easy to come up with a minimal cost, conservative cost of $10 million per year. Now, if we look at recent surveys in terms of how many chronically homeless there are in the county and just round down to about 1,000, that amounts to about $10,000 per chronically homeless individual in Sarasota County each year.
In public funds.
In public funds, mostly just straight tax dollars. Historically, what has the city of Sarasota done to respond? As I mentioned, shortly after the closure of G. Pierce Woods in 2002, we saw an uptick on the streets in Sarasota. In 2003, the local Salvation Army responded to increasing street homelessness with the construction of its 220-bed Center of Hope campus at 10th and Central. The city of Sarasota permitted and authorized those facilities. So in 2003, the shelter in town went from 30-bed capacity to 220-bed capacity. And it was thought at the time that that would be adequate to respond to the growing homelessness challenge in the city and the county. Today, the Salvation Army, as you know, has usually filled the capacity and has evolved to require that most residents participate in substance abuse programs to stabilize their lives upon leaving the shelter. On a typical evening, 160 to 180 of the beds at the Salvation Army are reserved for substance abuse programs, occupied by residents who come from throughout the county. The average stay at the Salvation Army is 45 days, but can go up to 90 days. The local Salvation Army operates on an annual budget of approximately $9 million. Overall, the Salvation Army does an admirable job transitioning its residents into housing and often has a waiting list to enter its substance abuse programs. The city also supports the Salvation Army with an $80,000 grant for the Street Team program, which has been quite successful in helping find individuals jobs.
So we take the $10 million in pure public money and add $9 million that's required to support the Salvation Army, and we're at about $19 million now.
Yeah, and we'll get up to 20 million pretty quick right here. But I would just note, after the closure of G. Pierce Woods Hospital, the city of Sarasota has been, in terms of our research, the only city in Sarasota County to permit a shelter for the chronically homeless. In researching this issue, the representatives of nearby jurisdictions, when asked how they deal with the chronically homeless in their communities, the typical response is, we send them to Sarasota. And I know some of you have heard that. I know I've heard it on several occasions. This reality and the policy of centralizing and concentrating the challenge of the chronically homeless in one community has, in the consensus judgment of staff, exacerbated the problem, making it more difficult to return homeless individuals to stability while overwhelming the current service providers in some neighborhoods in which they reside.
Question.
Yes, sir.
In comparison to Commissioner Zimmerman's, what's the outlay of surrounding communities, if that's possible? If we were doing 19 million, close to 20 million here, has there been a comparison in this to other cities around us, other than the fact that they all sit in Sarasota? Anybody else coming anywhere near these numbers?
Not that we're aware of, although they do have a Salvation Army in Venice, but they do not allow a shelter in Venice. And most of the employees at our Salvation Army are employed working at the shelter. There are about 45 or 50 employees there. But those aren't the only costs, and those aren't the only services that have been available here in the city. The Resurrection House Drop-In Center was opened in 1989. Located in a storefront at Kumquat and 4th, this association of churches and volunteers began by serving 50 to 75 individuals per day. Today, the Resurrection House is now serving 200 individuals per day, Monday through Friday. The good news is that's down 10% over the past 4 months. The Resurrection House operates with 5 full-time employees, 180 volunteers, on a budget of $600,000 per year. The Resurrection House provides a drop-in facility for individuals to get out of the weather, to shower, laundry, and to have coffee, snacks, socialize, receive additional clothing, have a mailbox, and acquire a bicycle during daylight hours. We have seen recent gatherings outside of the Resurrection House and have received a good number of complaints about some of the folks hanging around there because some have been prohibited from going into the Res House because of behavioral issues. And most recently, the City Commission authorized the implementation of the Sarasota Police Department's Homeless Outreach Team. And that outreach team has estimated that we have about 400 chronically homeless individuals who have spent significant time living on city streets over the past year, with a steady 300 being present, with some migrating in and out. Most of those who have been included in the count have lived on the streets for several years. Since their creation, the HOT team, and I'm pleased to report, has quietly placed 60 homeless veterans in housing over the past 9 months in association with other agencies in the homeless support community. And before we get into profiling or looking at what we actually have here now in terms of our homeless population, I just want to take a brief moment to explain how government is organized in Florida, sort of organize how we are moving forward in trying to tackle this challenging issue. Public health and mental health systems in Florida are the responsibility and operation of county government. Certified health departments, the money flows from the states and the feds, unless there's special grants, through the county. Now, that's not to cast any aspersions on the county. They're under-resourced as well. It's just in organizing our thoughts, that's kind of traditionally how the government is structured. And of course, on the jail and the EMS, those are partnerships, but the heavy lifting there, the lion's share of those costs are being borne by the criminal justice system. We have the local police, but then the biggest cost is the county jail. So that's a bit of a partnership. So you have 2 major systems that are having to deal with this challenge. One is the health system, and because there aren't enough resources in the health system, a bunch of it is spilling over to the criminal justice system, usually and oftentimes by default.
And Mayor, if I could just
If you would, sir.
remind everybody that we are county taxpayers as well, so that we are paying our share of the physical and mental health responsibilities the county needs to take care of, plus any additional efforts that we're making as a city.
And so folks know, unfortunately, Florida is ranked 49th out of 50 states in terms of funding mental health programs. So a lot of us are behind the 8 ball here. Fortunately, this community is a strong one, and many people have stepped up because they feel a moral obligation to try to treat the challenge and the problem. And a lot of folks have been very engaged for a long time, but the challenge is just such now that the infrastructure we've had in place, that the good people here have had in place for so many years, has been overwhelmed with the numbers. So before we get to next action steps, for the first time, we've got the voice of our local homeless community to give you some actual factual data on. And Marlon Brown, if you could bring up the PowerPoint. Our homeless outreach team has gone into the homeless community, and of course, much of what we're going to recommend to you here in just a moment is based on our intensive interactions with the homeless community and meeting. Marlon and I meet every 2 weeks with our homeless outreach team and the chief of police. But this is a brief snapshot of what we believe is the reality on our streets based on just under 60 surveys that were done here in the last few days. 75% of those surveyed were male. The average age, both male and female, is 48. When we asked folks how were they feeling, you can see the numbers: 34% good, 52% okay, 14% not so good. This is one of the most interesting statistics I think that we're going to show tonight. The average time on the streets in the city of Sarasota, 3.9 years, almost 4 years. Okay, and of those folks who were surveyed, they've been on average in the city. On average, now this is a total of all of them. Some are here shorter, some are here longer, but on average they've been here 14.2 years. We asked, where did you go to high school? 25% were local, 5% were from Florida, 61% from out of state, and some did not answer. This may be a reflection of the population in general, and it would in general here, and it's rather consistent in the homeless community. Of those surveyed, most were not veterans. As I mentioned, we successfully have 60 veterans into housing over the last 9 months, thanks to Calvin and his crew. This is another very important statistics. Have you used EMS services while living on the street? Of those surveyed, 45% have, 54% have not. Have you used hospital services while living on the street? Fully 2/3 of those surveyed appear to have used hospital services, and some multiple occasions, same with EMS. We asked if folks living on the streets have insurance. 27% said yes, 73% no. Type of insurance equally split between Medicare, Medicaid, and 20% other. Do you have regular income? 77% said no, but encouragingly, 23% appear to have some regular income.
Question, Mayor.
Yes, please.
Type of insurance, 40% said Medicare. Does that indicate that these people that 40% of those with insurance are over 65 years old?
It could. And
62 perhaps?
62,
Okay.
yeah, it could be 62, yeah. That's interesting.
Now, that's only a quarter have insurance, and then 40% of a quarter, so, we're down into the 12% range.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Type of income, 34% claim to have a job of some sort, 34% are on SSI, and 32% are on disability. Actually, 2/3 are on some sort of disability. Do you have any substance abuse or addiction challenges? 43% say yes. This is relatively consistent with the point-in-time survey. 56% say no. The type of challenge, interesting enough, drugs, there's a 39%, alcohol at 26%, 9 or both. So it looks like drugs are even more serious problem than alcohol, according to these self-reporting surveys. And fairly consistent with mental health challenges, 43% yes. Have you been arrested while living on the streets? 54% yes, 45% no. Again, multiple arrests. We have individuals who have been arrested dozens of times. Do you prefer living on the streets? We hear this a lot, but in this survey, we hear people speculate about this a lot, but of these responses, 93% say they do not prefer living on the streets.
Mayor, question?
Yes, please.
What are they, back to the arrests, what are they arrested for?
Some criminal incident, that it could have been an assault. Some of these could be trespass. I mean, they run the range from minor misdemeanors to major felonies.
Okay, so the whole gamut.
We had one, you recall, a few months ago, where somebody threw petroleum on somebody else, and they were trying to light a match. And so 54% admit being arrested. Most, 93, do not prefer living on the streets. Have you been to the Salvation Army? 91% of our chronically homeless community have been to the Salvation Army, and 61% claim that they were provided some help. How many have been to the Resurrection House? 91% claim that they have used the Res House.
That's the same population.
Yes.
Same number at least.
Going, same number,
Yep.
going between the two.
Yep. And 88% say the Resurrection House was some help. Now, when we ask this question, would you be willing to go to a homeless transition facility program for up to 90 days and work with a counselor caseworker to plan for your future? Will you help to support the maintenance and operations of the homeless transition facility? 2/3 or 66% said yes, 20% said no. If you're not from Sarasota, do you have any interest in returning to your hometown or former community if a support network can be organized? Somewhat surprising, 38% said yes. When we asked our chronically homeless community if they ever heard of Housing First, 13% had, but 82% had not. If Housing First could provide you with an apartment, would you be interested? 88% said yes, and only 4% said no. If in a home, would you work with a caseworker to get your life in order? 82% said yes. I believe this is our last question. Of the following, what do you think are the top 3 highest priorities for getting chronically homeless off the streets? This is refreshing to hear. 73% said employment. 63% said low-cost housing, even if a single room. And then 38% cited casework support, 38% emergency shelter housing. The other 2 categories were related to mental care, substance abuse, and securing benefits.
The largest number there shows 73% wanted employment. In a city where our jobs outside of skilled personnel pretty much now, even in the crafts of building and construction, that's a greater, even that challenge for us to provide employment is one of the greatest challenges that we do now have with our local populace also looking for the same jobs.
A lot of folks competing for local jobs. But this research, our experience over the last 9 months, our research, this survey, speaking with so many people who have involved in this, including and especially our outreach team, we're coming up, the staff is coming up with 8 possible action steps to consider in responding to the chronically homeless challenge. And we've listed some goals. And I'll go through those really briefly. Number 1, the city hire a homeless coordinator and also community liaison with the goal, and we'll be returning these to a future agenda, to get someone hired as quickly as we can upon the City Commission's authorization to do so, hopefully in 60 to 90 days after your authorization. Number 2, that the city begin to support the redirection of resources to housing programs, and that we concur with the Suncoast Partnership to End Homeless and national experience. That is essential that the street and homeless services caseworkers have the opportunity to direct chronically homeless individuals to safe and sanitary housing units as rapidly as they can be made available. Area foundations, philanthropists, and others could be called upon to understand and support this initiative by raising funds to cover staff and fund the critical rent gaps of the chronically homeless who express a desire to move off of the streets. While difficult, with no significant funding currently in place, this initiative could begin to reduce chronic homelessness and improve treatment outcomes while reducing the $10 million in annual taxpayer costs incurred under the current approach, which requires a heavy emphasis on the criminal justice response system. In setting a goal for this is something that would have to be organized with fundraisers. We would suggest a goal of providing 100 units of permanent supportive housing per year at $1,000 per month, which equals $12,000 per year, to cover the cost of each permanent supportive housing units. $1.2 million would have to be fundraised in year 1, with an additional $300,000 for administrative coordination and support, for a total cost of $1.5 million annually. Action item number 3.
Excuse me?
Pardon?
That would be on top of the 20 million that's already being outlaid.
Unless we can figure out how to use the savings to fund it. If we can prove we can bring down jail cells, if we can prove we can bring down EMS, we should at least have the conversation about redirecting those resources to something more promising. Number three, we see a need for a street diversion or navigation center with transition housing. This would be a smaller, perhaps 25 to 50 bed short stay stabilization or navigation facility that should be located centrally in the county to facilitate the newly homeless toward permanent housing and support systems. And we have some more language in here, but our surveys indicate that at least the chronically homeless are telling us they want to be a part of the initiative, they want to be a part of the effort. So we would suggest that the jobs at this facility, at least some of them, be made available for them to support and to help with. And we look at some creativity and innovation here and maybe even have some employment opportunities associated with this navigation center. We will also, in the goals here, suggest that the faith-based communities and other organizations get engaged in this, because this would require the establishment of 100 transient housing units. And if 100 organizations, including churches within the county, could each sponsor one unit of supportive transition housing over the course of a year at a cost of approximately $1,000 per month or $12,000 per year, 100 transition units will be in service readying individuals for permanent housing. If initiated, this facility would be expected to evolve over time as best practices for successful outcomes are discovered and as experiments are undertaken. A key part to the long-term strategy which this would be involved with, we've seen how long people have been on the streets, and we have a lot of catching up to do. But a part of the key that we've learned is getting people off the streets quickly will prevent them from being on the streets for a long time, where that year upon year, month upon month behavior becomes normalized and deterioration occurs. So we have a suggestion for permanent housing, and we have a suggestion for transition housing, and have organized that in two different directions. Action item 4, the City Commission, policymakers, anyone who can continue to advocate for more mental health beds in our county. We would ask that the number of mental health beds be doubled within 2 years, with 25% of the beds being reserved for court-ordered and low-income diagnosis and treatment, court-ordered or voluntary treatment. Action item number 5, we're challenging the Chamber of Commerce and developers to explore a private sector initiative to look at low-cost housing options. Healthy communities strive to maintain a range of housing options. The range of housing covers emergency, transition, low-cost, moderate affordable, market, and upper income. We have a very significant gap in the low rent area, so we're challenging developers and the Chamber of Commerce to establish a county-wide low-income affordable housing collaborative within 1 year with the goal to build 100 low-cost housing units in Sarasota County per year over a 5-year period.
Question, sir. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, you have a question.
The question was, with the action plan to build these homes, the question is, how much of a spread in demographics are we going to see with these facilities of the homes? Do we get them in an area that is already predominantly low rent, or are we going to spread them throughout the county?
The flavor of this report and this initiative, Mayor, is a more scattered housing basis approach where folks can fit in. There's less pressure on them to return to the streets or the drugs, and also so there isn't an over-concentration in any one given neighborhood anywhere. But we do want to allow, of course, in this conversation for flexibility, new materials, new sizes, and really a totally open mind going into this.
Vice Mayor.
I just have a suggestion that we might also involve the Suncoast Builders Exchange in that process, as well as the Chamber of Commerce.
The Gulf Coast?
Oh, Gulf Coast, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good idea. Good.
Action item number 6. Policymakers explore additional funding options to fund chronically homeless programs for ballot consideration in the next countywide election. State and county leaders need to explore voter-authorized funding to sustain the action steps described herein and other prudent measures to minimize chronic homelessness in Sarasota County, as has been done in other areas of Florida, including Broward County and Miami. The goal is to allow countywide voters to determine at the next countywide election if a sin tax or some other appropriate tax levy or fee should be used to finance and sustain efforts to minimize chronic homelessness in Sarasota County.
Commissioner Atwell.
Other communities that have used the SIN have done this.
Yes. And there are people in the community researching it.
Okay,
as we
great.
speak.
All right.
Number 7, this is relatively important. They're all important, but this one is really important to our homeless outreach team, that we have access to the homeless management information system. The federal government mandates this. We've contributed to it over the years. It really just fast forwards our casework much faster if we can have access to this information. So we know the state legislature is considering it, but if to exempt this from public records. But if it isn't acted upon by the state legislature, we still need, as other PDs in the state of Florida, have access to the HMIS system, and we'd look to the law department to do their best to help us get this done. And lastly, we would suggesting that we print out chronically homeless information cards to give to the homeless in the community, especially new arrivals. And on the flip side of that card, we remind the chronically homeless that there is also a community responsibility to adhere to our codes and our ordinances and our laws and be good citizens, as the citizens here have been in funding so many programs now over the decades. So, Mayor, to summarize and conclude here, although this is a daunting challenge, we believe that the above recommendations provide a promising action strategy. These pilot programs and the needed flexibility to experiment provides a fresh, new roadmap to improve our collective response to the chronic homeless challenge and its associated human and financial costs. Our research and experience makes clear that the current concentration of homeless services in a small geographical area within Sarasota County is not serving the homeless effectively overall, or the challenge, with the challenge overwhelming the homeless services infrastructure and our traditional approach. The current approach, as you know, has also negatively impacted commerce in the area where most countywide services to the chronically homeless have been concentrated. This report emphasizes the need for a more decentralized approach, which will not overly stress neighborhoods and commerce districts, while also encouraging chronically homeless to break free from drug and substance abuse patterns. Well, there are many details to work out. Doing little will obviously result in more of the same. So we just conclude by reminding everybody, as we look back at Sarasota's history, this community has been a special and highly desirable place, largely due to the many collaborations and partnerships which have come together over the years to meet the critical challenges and opportunities of each generation. Those successes now draw 4 million visitors to this region every year, including at least 3.5 million to the city of Sarasota. So as we continue to evolve our approach and refine our approach to this, I and the staff remain hopeful and confident that the community is once again prepared to rise, craft, and resource more effective solutions to the most difficult challenge of our time that we've experienced in recent years. And I'm most pleased that these strategies have evolved from our community, from the grassroots, from the people who have been engaged with this challenge for literally years and years and years now. So that completes our update and action step recommendations. Your feedback is certainly welcome, and we will bring this back to you for approval and consideration, hopefully at your next meeting.
Commissioner Normal.
Mr. Barwin, kudos to you and everyone else who worked on this. This is really excellent, and with specificity for Sarasota. It's really a step forward. I'm looking forward to working on it with you and to working with the county and all our partners on developing something. I would ask that one issue that seems to come back to bite us on a regular basis be added. There are a lot of registered sex offenders who are homeless, and they're registered as living on 10th Street under the tree. But today, I think we all received a notice that a sexual predator, which is a sex offender, only worse, has been released to a certain address. And I actually drove up to see where the address was, thinking it was very close to the Salvation Army. And in fact, it was not the Salvation Army, it was Coastal Behavioral Health Care. And they are a short-term facility most of the time, 72 hours. Now, of course, they couldn't give me any information about the individual, but the question is, what happens when he checks out after 72 hours? Do they give him any guidance regarding where to register again? The reason I bring it up now is because I know the Pinellas shelter, the Come As You Are shelter, would not take sex offenders for more than a day or so. Most shelters don't and can't, and they're located within 1,000 feet of child care facilities and schools, and so they cannot take them. So the location of any kind of Housing First facility should take into account there should be at least one such facility that could handle these individuals who cannot live within 1,000 feet of a school or a child care facility. I just ask that
Yes,
be
thank you.
added in.
We will look into that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I just want to echo what Commissioner Normal said. I think this is wonderful. I want to start by giving a shout out and a salute again to Tom Tryon. I hope he's listening. He wrote a great editorial yesterday on, yes, the community has accomplished many things, and this is a wonderful response to that this city, we're out there and we're going to be doing all kinds of things. I think we're part of it. We're going to work with the county on this. I think this, especially, as you know, this part, the street diversion, navigation center, transition housing, I like to call it first stop, whatever you want. I'm so glad this is in there because I think this is a fairly expendable population that we're always dealing with that may not be ready for housing. So I think this is really good, and the way you substantively talked about how we make that happen, I think assuages a lot of people's views about how we dealt with it in the first place. So I just want people to know that we're on our way on this. Most importantly, I'm very excited that we can have a homeless coordinator. This is helpful to this commission. It's helpful to the community that will work with the county, work with Wayne Appleby, work with all of you out there. This is really important to us to do this. Even though we're not being strident about it, we're being community oriented, but we will have our own homeless coordinator. And I love that idea. So thank you. Good job.
Commissioner Zimmerman. Vice Mayor.
You included this article from the Wall Street Journal about the navigation center that they're planning in San Francisco, based upon a $3 million anonymous donation. And in that navigation center, they talk about being able to bring your personal belongings and your pets even. Is that what you're thinking about?
There's a lot of work yet to be done, but it looked like a pretty good model.
Were you directing that to me, Vice Mayor, or
No,
to Tom?
I was just saying it. Even your pets.
But you love pets. No, and that's a really good question, but I think there's a lot to look at here because I think this is exciting. And when you narrow this down, that perhaps you start with 25 to 50 beds short, stabilizing these people that we excuse me? Oh, I couldn't hear my train of thought, sorry. That's something we can talk about, but because when you talk about hurricane preparedness, we always talk about what shelters take dogs and cats. Interesting question. And I'm willing to talk about that. I just would love to see something like this work without going back to what we had to before, that would be the first stop for people as we move along and get them into housing. And that works for me.
Please.
Well, I think the most interesting thing about the article, besides the dogs, which I'm completely in favor of,
Sure.
I wouldn't leave my dog, is that this shelter, this is temporary.
Yeah.
It's only temporary, and it's just to get people off the street, give them some sort of triage, and get them into some sort of more permanent housing. And the reason they're doing this is because there's evidence that shows that more permanent housing works, and just a continual shelter model does not. So I think you've done a great job.
Vice Mayor.
And the shelter itself will only be open a maximum of 18 months. And after that, the site is slated to be developed into below-market rate housing.
Well,
I
we'll
think-
talk.
I think that one of the most important things brought out in this whole conversation is that this was to a county opening rather than the conversation being locked into the city. It is evident that the City of Sarasota has taken on the only initiative and the first initiative to the chronic homeless with the 1990 or 1999, whichever, 10th Street facility of Salvation Army and again Resurrection House. Unless we're open to have an open mind wider than some our minds, we will still yet come back to the same place and the same argument of location. So I cannot go beyond that, and no matter what kind of a facility we put together, location is still going to be location, and it will still bear one of the most challenging parts to this whole idea. Okay? At this time, we have Mr. Randy Gallo. Miss Randy Gallo.
She left.
And Commissioners, we cannot take a vote on anything other than the acceptance of the report.
I would move we accept the report.
Second.
Mr.
Yep, Mayor, I just wanted to thank all those folks who are in the trenches who've communicated with us and shared their candid thoughts and their experiences, and especially our homeless outreach team has been out in the field getting the surveys done. It's been very helpful to trying to really extract the meaning and some strategic direction here, and appreciate all of their help.
Very good.
And all of this will be posted online. We'll put we had to go through a lot of information quickly, but we'll put the background and the recommendations and the homeless survey online for other folks to read.
Very good. We have a motion and a second for the conversation. Commissioners, if you would vote, please. Commissioners, is this your vote?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. It's unanimous.
Mayor, can I follow up on this for a second?
Yes, sir.
I presume we'll be doing a press release saying that the city has developed and received this report. The city is, moving forward with an action plan that will, be further evaluated and pursued. And you can find all of the details on the website. So I presume we'll.
Yes, we're going to try to get as much information out as we can, so when it comes back to you for authorization to proceed, whatever elements you support, we can get out and begin right away to implement and sell and try to energize.
Commissioner Normal.
I just would like, in the interest of press release that I presume Jan will be having to write, that Is it fair to say that we're all looking forward to working with the county on this?
We're willing to work with anyone. I can't get my train of thought. We're willing to work with anybody and everybody
And everybody,
to
the
solve
faith
the
community, everyone.
the issue at hand. When this all started, remember, we said that this was a Sarasota problem. So that includes everybody in Sarasota willing to work on the initiative.
Sarasota County.
Yes, I mean, Sarasota County. Okay? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Well, while we're on the homelessness topic, we have, the Shore Group has scheduled this conference that conflicts with our schedule. And several people came forward and wanted to know if we're going to designate someone to go there during our budget hearing.
And Mayor, if I may respond to that, it's even more complicated because two of us are scheduled for a candidates forum that same evening.
Moments after the budget hearing.
Moments after the budget hearing, we'll have a foot race to the site of the forum. So two of us are not going to be able to attend this forum, or we're going to just give up and not go to the forum and represent the city here. So I would hope that one of the three other commissioners would agree not only to go to the forum carrying our flag with them, but also perhaps to even present as something to bring to the party, so to speak, that the city has developed an action plan, a 7-step, I think it's 7-step, 8-step action plan that we will use as a way to go forward.
Mayor,
Yes.
my only concern about that is that's Monday, that's awfully soon. To present this to them, to this group, Monday night, that just seems kind of soon. I mean, I know we're going to get a press release out and everything, but to present that, whoever goes, I don't know, I mean.
I think there may be some sunshine issues. I don't think that one
What
we
you
haven't
did was you
voted on it
accepted
yet.
but
Yeah.
you don't,
accepted
you may
it.
separate out those various points and prioritize some. That's what I was thinking in that discussion. I thought warranted further public notice, that's all. But I don't see any problem taking it and telling someone what has happened, as long as that's accurate and factual, which I'm sure it would be. No,
Yes, Vice
Well,
Mayor.
here is the issue. We're not on the same page. And that's the real issue, that the remaining three of us are not on the same page. And I know when the WSLR forum was there was some debate about that. So I don't want it to be assumed that we are a monolithic group.
Absolutely.
So then maybe it would be better for this commission to send a staff member to this meeting representing, because we still have a budget meeting that we're going to be held responsible for. And this is only one component. That person going would only present what we have been presented tonight. That way it would be non-biased, or he or she would be non-biased in just making a presentation. I mean, because it is evident the three other remaining commissioners would not be unbiased in the presentation that he or she would present. Vice Mayor?
Well, here's the other issue, and I can see the body language across the room is that they want us to listen to them. They don't necessarily want to listen to us.
So, go ahead.
I mean, all of us have met with the group from Shore, and, we're all, wish them well. Unfortunately, there was a conflict. We actually asked, could they change it? But nothing could be, no one checked with our schedule. So it's with no ill will that we cannot appear. There are sunshine issues, I believe. If one person went and considered themselves the spokesperson for the rest of us, that can't be done. But there had been a request for a letter, I believe, and certainly a letter could be written with this attached, saying this is what's been presented.
Okay, we've solved it. Issue solved. I have the deputy and the vice and the city manager who will attend this meeting on our behalf,
Wonderful.
representing the city.
Wonderful.
Okay? Is that okay, gentlemen?
Be a good opportunity to let
Thank
them know
you.
what we're working on.
Very good, thank you. Yes,
Actually, it'd be wonderful if you could enlist their help, because they're exactly the type of organization that seems to want to really help us.
That's right.
And that would be wonderful.